Hi, I'm Kirsten Schnurl, and I'm a river guide on the Salmon and Snake Rivers, and I live in Lewiston, Idaho. And I was hoping you could share more about how salmon influence the food web, nutrient cycles, and ecology of the Salmon River.
Yeah, so adult salmon are famous for returning and spawning and dying, and their carcasses are part of the food web in a stream, and they feed the food web there in multiple ways. There's some direct consumption of the carcasses by wildlife and of the adult salmon prior, notably by things like bears, and by invertebrates, both in the stream, things like caddisflies will directly feed on those, and the carcasses that are carried into the riparian zone are often become basically breeding grounds for maggots, and those flies then become part of the food web along the riparian zone and undoubtedly likely influence the ability of birds and riparian wildlife to persist. The nutrients that aren't directly consumed enter the food web as nitrogen and phosphorus, which can stimulate primary productivity through algae, and that algae is eaten by stream invertebrates. And it's thought that in a localized sense, depending on conditions, that productivity can increase the ability of that stream to support juvenile salmon and other fishes. An area that there's not much known about it, but we strongly suspect that those salmon carcasses also feed freshwater mussels, which filter feed and likely hold and retain and then slowly release those nutrients over time and get those into the sediments. And remarkably, those freshwater mussels can live up to 100 years, and so they're probably the oldest thing living in most of the streams in Idaho where they occur. And it's important to really think about salmon returning and those carcasses feeding both the stream and the watershed, but the watershed also then returns many of those nutrients back to the stream through leaf production, leaf litter, and terrestrial invertebrates. And in fact, juvenile salmon often get about half of their dietary needs from insects that have fallen into the stream rather than insects that have been produced in the stream. It's an active area of research.
So those marine-derived nutrients I discussed pass through both the aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. Mammals like this bear, and you probably didn't know that bears actually snorkel, fish, raptors, songbirds, insects, all depend on these nutrients. So the severe declines in salmon are actually decreasing the productivity and function of these ecosystems. For example, the growth rates of native west slope cutthroat in the Middle Fork have declined since salmon abundances began declining in the 1970s. And to illustrate the importance of these nutrients, the Shoshone-Bannock tribe has been engaged in research in Redfish Lake and other upper Salmon River Basin sockeye lakes. They're measuring isotopic nitrogen levels in the lake sediments. And those nitrogen levels have been very high for about 1,300 years until construction of the hydro system in the Snake and Columbia. And since that modern dam construction period, nitrogen levels have exponentially declined. And as tribal biologist for the Shoshone-Bannock tribe, Chad Coulter said, quote, "We're headed for bankruptcy," unquote. So these nutrients are really the building blocks of that whole ecosystem in the Salmon River Basin.